Hey everybody, this is Ike Morgan down in Alabama on the weekend. Last week we did a longer discussion between AL.com reporter Leada, Gore, and myself, just because we like to talk news and politics anyway, and figured it could supplement our daily short news briefings. We did the same thing this week, and again we remembered to turn the mic on, so we'll offer it up here. Now don't forget to rate the show on whatever app you use, or use our Amazon page if you're listening to your flash briefing. But let's get to it.
Hey, this is Ike, and we've got Leada Gore with us again this weekend. We're going to try another one of these weekend shows. And we really couldn't stand not doing one this week because we got the gift of Robert Bentley coming out of the woodwork in a political sense. Leada did a story off an interview he did. Can you tell us a little bit about what Dr. Bentley's up to?
Sure. Well, okay, so he resigns from governor. He goes and he's a physician in Tuscaloosa, and we think, okay, we're done. We're finished with Robert Bentley. But apparently we're never going to be finished with Robert Bentley. So he started, poking his foot out, kind of like doing free health screenings and just weird stuff sort of in the community. I mean, it's good stuff he's doing in the community, but he was sort of back there in the community. Right. So he had these social media sites that were not, he was never active. He wasn't tweeting and that kind of stuff. But all of a sudden, he starts picking this up, and this new thing comes out called Bentley for Alabama that's kind of a website, Facebook presence. He just has a presence talking about all his accomplishments as governor, almost like an archives.
Okay, so it's more than just a Twitter account. This is like a whole brand kind of thing. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's a brand. That's a good word. Yeah, no, That's a good word. So he's out there with this. Within a matter of days, he sits down with the website Yellowhammer News for this interview in which it looked more like a Q&A. I have no idea if they gave him the questions and he provided the answers, or if it was an actual sit down.
Right.
But it was a very crafted response. Let me just say that. There were crafted questions. He wasn't asked real hard questions. And then he comes back with this very political answer. He was asked, would you ever consider, and they use the word running for or being in public office again, holding public office, particularly the U.S. Senate race in 2020 for the seat that's now held by Doug Jones, Democrat Doug Jones. Well, he gives this typical response, how he loves Alabama, blah, blah, blah. But very specifically at the end says, yes, I would consider running, or holding public office. I don't want to say running. He says holding public office. Well, the squirrely part about all this is his plea deal that he took in relation to his resignation very specifically says he will not seek or hold public office. Mm-hmm. So it just sort of left you going, I actually started doubting myself, where you go back and read the plea deal just to look at the words and think, well, did I misunderstand something, or did he misunderstand something? So Yellowhammer came out with another thing, and I don't know all the details in it, where they talked to an attorney who said, well, he probably could hold office. It wasn't an attorney involved in the case. So it's just sort of like a legal conjecture. But it's whether he can or can't, that's one story. But there's two parts of this that are really fascinating to me. One is that he thinks he can. It's pretty obvious he thinks that he'd get elected.
When he was in office, a lot of times there seemed to be a similar disconnect with, do the people love me? But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's a great point. Because, when he ran in 2010, I was at a political forum, maybe 2009, that first term. I was at a political forum where he got up, all the gubernatorial candidates were there, and he was by far the least interesting. And nobody in the room, it's a bunch of press people. We didn't even, you might have written down his name in like a sentence, but you just didn't give him much of a chance. So then he wins, and it was this big upset, and he's this great family man. And then, of course, we all know what happened after 2014. It went off the rails. But I think the best way to describe it is I think he started believing a lot of his own press. And the thing that was so interesting about this article is he really does believe it. It wasn't just something he said to get through a political crisis. He really believes that he was this great, fantastic governor that sort of turned the state around. He keeps talking about the 2011 tornadoes, which he did do a good job. He was a good head of state at that point. But it's almost like he forgets the last 2 years of his term, or his gubernatorial term, the other part about this whole thing that is so fascinating to me is, so he loses his job because he has this relationship with Rebecca Caldwell Mason, who is his advisor. And I'm just going to say he has a relationship because he still doesn't ever really say what it was. But I mean, we all heard the audio text. We kind of can. I don't know anybody who talks like that, you know. Right. Well, she works for him in his medical practice as the office manager. But her background's in media and political advising and blah blah blah. Well, if you read a lot of her stuff, the speeches she wrote, the things she wrote for him, you can go on to this Bentley for Alabama and you can tell who's behind this. This is a conjecture on my part because I can assure you they will not confirm it. But it is a very Mason-like approach to media. And I find that very interesting. So what we've learned is that he still believes it and that she's still in the game backing him. Now, would anybody vote for him? I don't know. That would be bizarre, wouldn't it?
I have not heard, I did not hear a lot of conservative voices saying y'all need to leave Governor Bentley alone during his downfall. They were, I mean, there may have been, more of the people in, of note in certain places, but the people I know are just the folks out there and the people I'm connected to on social media and I didn't get a fan base or a pushback, so I can't imagine where his support might come from. But
no, I can't either. And I think what everybody still wants to know is, I mean, it's almost like you want to sit him in a room and say, "Are you delusional?"
Yeah.
And if you're still having this relationship, this is the strangest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And it really is for a man who really played up his family ties and his connection. I'll never forget his portrait hanging in the rotunda in Montgomery. His official governor's, portrait has a picture of Diane Bentley painted. He has her picture painted into his picture, like a photo sitting on his desk. And how weird that is, to go from sort of one to the other. So it makes you question, was the first one ever legitimate? Or was he just showing us the side that he wanted to show us? Meanwhile, he's in Tuscaloosa doing skin cancer checks, which are a good thing. So, maybe that would be his best option, would be just to continue being a good doctor and just stay in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah. And I still have, and people get mad about me and listen, I still have like sympathy deep down in my heart for him because I think he does want to believe a certain thing and a certain. Well, I don't
You're
mean.
You're just nicer than I am.
At the same time, he deserves everything has gotten, because of what has come out. I hate that people are putting themselves through that. You know what I mean?
And I hate to say it this way because we're all getting older and some of us quicker than others, but it's almost like there's no fool like an old fool, and you can't help feel like he's getting played. Or at least I hope he's getting played, that he's not really that gullible, and so it is a sad, he could have gone out at the end of his 2 terms. And he wasn't a historic governor, but he wasn't a bad governor. He could sort of be riding this wave of low unemployment that Kay Ivey is getting to surf on now and gone on and not embarrassed the state. But, when I wrote the story about Rebecca Mason working for him in his doctor's practice, the Washington Post has been very interested in the Bentley story from the beginning. They've loved the whole thing, of course,
Oh, yeah.
It plays into so many stereotypes. And one of the first things I get is a tweet back from somebody at the Washington Post who had written about really AL.com and Alabama Media Group's coverage of this. And it was basically saying, oh, my gosh, are y'all ever going to get rid of him? And I sent back and said, no, we may not ever get rid of him. But, it's an interesting story. I don't know if he'll ever run. Maybe appoint him like, some commission of something. But I think we're probably done with Robert Bentley.
And that may mean, if he's not delusional about whether he can run, maybe he is thinking somewhere in that sense.
Yeah,
Or maybe
ceremonial thing.
Maybe he's the senior advisor for someone he knows well who wants to run. I'm just going to leave that there. Listen, before we go any further, let me go ahead and just read the question and answer that spurred this, so that people can hear what he said. The question from Yellowhammer at yellowhammernews.com. Would you consider a return to public office, maybe the U.S. Senate in 2020? So they were very specific about that
Yeah.
question. And his
Yeah.
answer was, I love serving the people of this state. Serving as governor was the greatest honor of my life. I have a heart for our people, and I believe we are all called to serve one another in some capacity. I found public service was a way to do that. I believe what is missing in public service today is loving the people that you serve and wanting to help those who need help, especially those who are less fortunate and really have nothing. If God shows me the avenue where I can do that, I'll do it. So that's what he said.
Right.
And maybe
Well, and loving, I would have left out the line about loving people because that's not been his problem. Maybe loving people a little less would be a better job.
Well, 2020's kind of voodoo land anyway, especially when you're talking about a return from the political dead like Bentley. But who is going to run? Who's going to be the presumptive maybe favorite even over Doug Jones on the Republican side?
I mean, it's Bradley Byrne. I mean, that's he's made it clear. I think he's staked out his path with his fellow congressional delegates. He checked with Mo Brooks, which would have been a fascinating race. Any race you have Mo Brooks in is fun. But he's kind of done the Gary Palmer check, the Mo Brooks check. You know, I don't know if he's done the Martha Roby check. I'm sure he has. But I think Byrne knows that it's a great time for him, and that he's done a congressperson is a lot different than a senator. You don't have the impact in the House that you do in the Senate. And he knows that, and I think he wants that. I mean, it's a prime Senate race. It's set up for Republicans perfectly. And frankly, it's set up for Doug Jones in the worst. If he got the easiest possible scenario in the first race, it's a hard one this time. He's not going to be able to, unless, I don't know, Republicans nominate Roy Moore again. There's not a, and I wouldn't be shocked if he runs, by the way, but not a, he'll run. There's not a gimme this time. I don't think that will happen. So I think Byrne is the prohibitive favorite. I mean, there's going to be some others. I heard Tommy Battle thrown out. A real strong one. I think people want him here. I just think Byrne's your man, and I think he's going to have the money lined up to do that because that is an easy pickup for Republicans that they could get in the Senate that should, in their mind, should never have gone Democrat in the first place. And what's Doug Jones got? Doug Jones is now sitting here thinking, well, what do I do for 2 years? Do I just say I'm going to vote however I want for 2 years, or am I playing it for 2020? And we'll start seeing that with the Kavanaugh vote. If he votes for Kavanaugh, he's in it to win it in 2020. If he doesn't, he knows his time's 2 years and I'm done.
Does he take the Democrat side for granted?
Right.
Well, they're going to vote for me anyway, sort of like the Republicans often do.
Absolutely.
Well, a lot of people in Alabama wish that Byrne would have won the nomination back when he ran against Bentley for governor. Some new folks to the state might not remember that he was sort of the guy who was going to be governor.
Yeah. Well, and that the thing that I talked about going to the political forum, that was the man. That is who you thought. And then typical fashion where, that front runner can get knocked down and then you end up with a Guy Hunt or a Robert Bentley or somebody that kind of comes up from the pack. But that was actually a really good gubernatorial race back then. There was a lot of candidates involved and some were real squirrely, but some were pretty good. And that's a good one. If you ever want a fascinating political piece, go see where some of those guys lined up. We may have to save that for a podcast in the future. There's some great stories there.
Oh, yeah. And the AEA still had stroke back then.
Yep. And money.
They influenced.
Which they have neither now.
Right. And didn't they influence a little bit on the Republican side?
Absolutely. Yeah. They were picking and choosing.
Mm-hmm.
And Bentley was very naive, I think, in a lot of ways. He did not pick up that I'm governor attitude, till he won that second term. And then I think John Archibald said it was like you walked in the room the next day and he knew something had changed. Uh-huh. And I think, that is absolutely the case. When he won that second term, everything changed. And, he's, 73, 74 now, which is certainly not old, but he wants his legacy secured. And right now his legacy is bad.
Right.
Or it's almost a joke. I guess that's the best way to say it.
It's more of I feel like it's more like that. I mean, you have the legal issues, certainly, with the money and covering up or all the allegations. But
Embarrassing. It's an embarrassing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But one other thing you had mentioned, Roy Moore, and I say this a bunch of times because I always like to come to the aid of some of the conservatives in the state. People pick on Alabama conservatives, but that was a really squirrely primary, and it was actually the smell of the Bentley issue was on Luther Strange through a series of things, and that's what caused that. So I can't imagine. Now, of course, he'll run. Every chance he gets, he's going to run for stuff. But he is never, other than that election. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But other than that election, he's never gotten. And other than the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court stuff, which nobody knows who judges are anyway, the typical voter, he's not gotten a foothold statewide in any of these runs for governor.
Got creamed in his race for governor, absolutely creamed. He is both the best of times and worst of times as far as luck when it comes to running for office. But no, I don't expect. Roy Moore must keep himself relevant if he wants to raise money, and that's the bottom line. Is he's got to raise money because. Let's be real blunt. He may have to pay out some big money. I don't know if he will. I think these things will drag on and drag on and drag on. And I think I'm going to sue you and you're going to sue me and we're all going to sue each other. But he's got to keep his relative nature. And I think that's just anybody who's held public office for that long. It's hard to walk away and go to the farm, and I don't think he wants to do that. I think he wants to be a voice. But very much like Bentley, well, actually much worse than Bentley. Roy Moore's voice, I don't know if you can get it back. I think it's tainted beyond belief. But, there are people in Alabama to this day. Every time I write about Roy Moore, I get two responses. One is, why are you writing about Roy Moore? Let him go, And the second response is people who will defend him to the end of the earth. The man never did anything. He's a great man. Everyone has a conspiracy. And it's very divided on him, But there are people that to this day will argue with me, including people in my own family who will argue with me over Thanksgiving dinner that this was a conspiracy and he is truly a great man.
Everybody talks about talking politics over Thanksgiving. My family's we really didn't. I mean, we really did. We talked about hunting. Where did we
did that too. Yeah.
Where did we jump that butt last weekend? Yeah, we need to try to walk the dogs in on the other side of that ridge.
Oh no, we do that too. We just there's one or two, but we generally have a no politics rule. But sometimes, sometimes we change. When my 91-year-old grandmother got on Twitter so she could tweet her suggestions to Donald Trump, if that tells you anything about my family, that should tell you kind of where we are on things. So
that's awesome. I hope he paid attention. Another thing that came up this week, and it's another long shot. So this is like the long shot episode right here that we were talking about. But another one was this proposal by what was a group of college kids that formed a nonprofit, and they crafted a proposal for an interstate that would go from West Texas all the way through Georgia to Augusta, and it would cut Alabama in half horizontally. And how much stock do you put in something like that? Well, lots of outlets wrote about it, and I saw where a couple of Texas politicians were talking about this is going to do this great thing and this great. So suddenly we're talking about I-14 that would cut Alabama from, let's see, it was Selma on the west side, about Selma, all the way over through Montgomery and to Phoenix City on the Georgia state line. And ALDOT, Alabama Department of Transportation, said, well, tap the brakes on this. There's no money, there's no plans, and funding is a real issue with this stuff. So probably not going to happen anytime soon. But we got to thinking, if we want an interstate, I'm not sure that would be where we'd put it. I mean, it might help some places economically. At the same time, I go through interstates. You don't have a boomtown at every exit. It doesn't always work like that. So I think when you're setting up an interstate, you do it for what a road's purpose is, which is to get people from point A to point B. Where would you put one if you were putting one somewhere in Alabama?
Yeah, thinking about that, you mentioned the hunting land. My husband would actually love it where they propose because that would take him to his hunting land at an easier path. So he votes for that.
Okay.
I will tell you, the history of interstates in the state's pretty fascinating because there's been such politics behind it. And a lot of people, I'm in Huntsville, we've talked about, North Alabama, Huntsville didn't get an interstate. Our closest interstate is 65 North, which if you're from downtown Huntsville, is a decent haul away. It went to Decatur instead, and there was a lot of politics behind that. So the question is, let's just say Alabama wins the lottery, and we get billions of dollars and we get to build an interstate. I can't even start to think about where I'd want it because all I could think about would be the arguing that would go into where you would put it. And then the fact that if anyone in this state had to build it, it would take the next 200 years to get it built. So it's hard for me. I mean, if we can't even get, one interchange built in 20 years, it's hard for me to even think. Now, again, love it. You build it in North Alabama, take me to wherever I need to go. But I'm like you, an interstate is not a solution. I mean, Huntsville has 565. So, I don't think it's some big cure-all. If we were going to have an extra interstate, like you said, it really needs to be built for traffic flow, and I'm not sure that's the best choice. Ask anybody who's driven, to the beach. They would tell you, let's add one that runs in addition to 65. You could just have a whole separate beach express from North Alabama. But so I don't know. We don't have the money, and it's a great idea. Hey, we would love it. But first of all, let's repair the roads and bridges we have now. And secondly, I can't even imagine. Where would you put it? I got to hear this answer.
Well, first of all, if you were allowed to move that money somewhere else, give me a couple more lanes of 65 in Shelby County.
Go.
That's going to help me get.
Yes.
I'm from the beach. I'm from the coast, so that helps me get home quicker. But I do understand. I don't want there to be one along that 331 corridor. I don't want it to happen because there are places I don't necessarily want to have to grow that much. Let me just put it that way. So I'm on the evil side of that. Y'all stay away from places that I go. But I'm one of those guys. I'm just tourists coming down here.
Yeah.
But there's more and more traffic. 65's congested. 231 more and more. And now you get a lot of people. Now everyone has Google Maps. They're taking back roads. Right. They're going through Opp. They're going through, to go down 331 to get to Destin and the west end of Panama City Beach. I think that if I were really planning it for traffic, I would probably take another interstate from North Alabama to take some pressure off 65 and take it
like a north-south route.
Yeah, and take it all the way to I-10 somewhere other than Mobile, so you've got two places to go.
Right. Well, and the thing about that is, if you look at the population centers, it's a north-south route. It's not an east-west route.
Right.
So if we're going to hit your Huntsville's, Birmingham's, Shelby County, Mobile, if you're going to hit, it'd be hard to hit Mobile unless you take a sharp, easterly turn. It's a great idea. It's not going to, I don't think we're actually going to see huge interstate projects in the next couple of years. Frankly, even if people thought it was a great idea for traffic flow and for population, there's just no money to fund something like that. Certainly not in this state, and I doubt any other state has it just laying around to fund it either.
Right. And there are going to be Amtrak trains going everywhere soon anyway. So,
and spaceships, don't forget that.
Everyone will take that. And spaceships.
Exactly. And I saw the Jetsons. We should have ships any day now. We don't need all that. So we're good.
I was guaranteed that those cartoons came out before I was born, and I don't. And now here I am going toward middle age, or maybe in it. I don't know how they measure that, but and I don't have it yet. So to heck with the Jetsons.
I think about that every time I'm at my house, which has all these like Amazon Alexa devices and stuff, and I ask it a question, and I think of the Jetsons that ordered food. You remember that? They would say, I want a sandwich, and it would fall down.
That's right.
So, surely before too long, we're going to get that. I can say, Google, Alexa, bring me a sandwich, and they'll make me a sandwich or something. I vote for that. Let's take the money from the interstate and put it towards that. That's a better deal.
I'm a Flintstones guy in a Jetsons world. So I don't know. I like the sandwiches made the old-fashioned way, except that I'm in there helping. I'm doing my share. Don't email me about that. All right, Lita. Well, thank you again for talking. I enjoyed
Thanks.
it.
No
Yeah.
problem.
I hope we offered the folks some things to think about. Maybe they learned something. Maybe they just laughed at us. I don't know.
Hey, thank y'all for listening. I'm Mike Morgan for Leada Gore, and we're down in Alabama. Y'all come see us anytime you want to on AL.com.